Hello. Today General Hospital will reveal Willow was no longer the broken woman who once cried silently in the shadows after losing her children. That version of her, the one who trembled before the courts, who accepted fate as punishment for past sins, had been left behind. What had taken root in her now was a fierce, unrelenting desperation, forged by months of isolation, longing, and the haunting silence of empty bedrooms once filled with laughter. The maternal instinct in her had evolved into something sharper, something more dangerous, and it pushed her into making a decision that shocked even herself. When she agreed to marry Drew in front of the family court, her voice didn't tremble, her gaze didn't flinch. She spoke with the cold assurance of a woman who had learned that love was no longer a luxury she could afford. This wasn't about romance or companionship, it was war, and Drew was her most strategic weapon. But what she didn't know, or perhaps refused to acknowledge, was the darkness that accompanied her new ally. Beneath Drew's well-tailored suits and comforting words was a calculated mind willing to commit the unthinkable. The man once praised for his honor and discipline had quietly transformed into a schemer, obsessed with control, obsessed with victory. In his pursuit to secure Willow's win in court, he orchestrated a vile plan that would exploit the one thing Michael cherished most: his ability to protect their children. The setting was all too perfect, the Metro Court pool, where Wiley was enrolled in swimming lessons, under the guise of normalcy. But Drew knew the schedules, the blind spots in the surveillance cameras, the moment Michael would be distracted answering a business call. In that narrow window of time, Wiley was left unguarded for only a few seconds, but it was enough. The little boy slipped, splashed into the water with a yelp that vanished beneath the surface. Lifeguards rushed to pull him out, panic erupted, and Michael returned just in time to cradle his son's shivering frame, unaware that the worst damage had already been done, not to Wiley's body, but to Michael's reputation. Whispers emerged almost immediately. Carefully seeded rumors that questioned why Michael wasn't watching his son, why a father who claimed to be attentive could allow something so dangerous to happen. Security footage emerged, selectively edited to highlight Michael looking down at his phone, captured at just the right moment to paint a portrait of negligence. Witnesses were subtly influenced. An offhand comment here, a gentle nudge there, and suddenly, what should have been an accident became ammunition. The court began to tilt. The image of Michael, the responsible parent, blurred, while Willow, supported by a man who appeared strong and unwavering, emerged as the safer, more stable choice. Willow, blinded by her need to reclaim motherhood, refused to question the details. She clung to the narrative that Drew offered her, a story in which Michael had simply failed, and she, the ever-watchful mother, had been unfairly silenced. In her heart, she feared the truth, but her mind buried it beneath rationalizations. It was easier to believe that the legal system was flawed than to admit she might be colluding with something sinister. Her days became consumed with preparations, court appearances, parenting evaluations, public statements, and all the while, Drew stood beside her, the perfect partner, the steady hand she believed she needed. But she never saw the shadow behind his eyes. Meanwhile, Michael was unraveling. The incident at the pool left him shaken, but more than that, it left him suspicious. Everything had happened too perfectly, too conveniently for Willow and Drew. The timing was immaculate, and the public fallout had been swift and devastating. He began to replay every detail in his mind, searching for cracks in the illusion. He didn't want to believe it, didn't want to imagine that Willow, the mother of his children, would ever be involved in something so manipulative, but the unease grew heavier with each passing day. As the whispers about his parenting spread, Michael launched his own quiet investigation. He requested raw footage from the security system, hired independent analysts to examine inconsistencies, and began cross-referencing witness statements. The more he dug, the more the threads began to fray. It wasn't long before one of Drew's trusted contacts, someone involved in the editing of the security footage, became careless. A traceable payment. A deleted message recovered. Michael followed the trail with a relentless focus born not just from anger, but from the need to protect Wiley and Amelia from the toxic spiral unfolding around them. He began to see Drew not as a rival father figure, but as a manipulator hiding behind a smile. What terrified Michael the most, though, was Willow's silence. She had to know, at least on some level. Had her desperation made her complicit? Or had she convinced herself that none of it mattered as long as she got her children back? As court dates loomed and custody decisions approached, tension rippled through every corner of Port Charles. Families were divided, friendships strained. Wiley had begun to ask questions: why his visits with Michael felt shorter, why Willow seemed different, why Drew always hovered nearby. Amelia, too young to understand, sensed the change in energy. And Willow, who once believed she was reclaiming her motherhood, found herself consumed by anxiety she couldn't name. Drew was always there, whispering reassurance, but the warmth in his voice had cooled. She noticed how he flinched at unplanned questions, how quickly he dismissed her concerns when she doubted the ethics of their methods. The weight of the lies began to crush her. At night, alone in the silence of her room, Willow replayed the day of the pool incident in her mind. She remembered Drew's strange insistence that they visit the courthouse immediately after the accident, how eager he was to talk to the press, to spin the narrative before Michael could recover. She remembered the tremor in Michael's voice as he carried Wiley away, not angry, just broken. She remembered the way Drew had smiled when the custody evaluator praised her strength and determination. And for the first time, the smile scared her. What started as a strategy had morphed into a nightmare. Willow now stood on the precipice of a victory built on deceit, her heart torn between reclaiming her children and confronting the possibility that she had sacrificed their innocence to do so. And somewhere, deep in her soul, a voice she had long silenced began to rise, demanding truth, demanding redemption, demanding that she choose who she would be when the illusion finally shattered. Because once Michael exposed the truth, and he would. The woman she had become might be too far gone to recognize the mother her children once loved. Meanwhile, Willow continued to present herself as the ideal mother, weaving a narrative so compelling that even the hardest of hearts in the courtroom began to tremble. With measured tears and trembling hands, she recounted nights spent staring into darkness, haunted by the absence of her children. She spoke of Amelia's small, confused voice whispering, "Where's Mommy?" just before falling asleep clutching a picture frame. She described the ache in her chest when Wiley, once so tender and warm in her embrace, now looked at her with the wariness of a stranger, his eyes cautious, unfamiliar, as if he was trying to remember who she used to be. Her testimony was more than performance. It was heartbreak laid bare, delivered with the desperation of a woman who believed that motherhood was not a right but a battlefield, and she was willing to crawl through fire to reclaim her place. She made the judge pause mid-note, made court officials look away to hide tears, and for a fleeting moment, even Michael wondered whether he had become too hardened, too suspicious, to see the pain behind her eyes as real. But beneath this carefully composed image of a mother seeking redemption, the machinery of deceit spun furiously in the background. Every heartstring she pulled, every sympathetic glance she earned, was tethered to an invisible thread woven by Drew. He left no stone unturned, no moral line uncrossed in his mission to tip the scales of justice. He leveraged his wealth, his influence, and his cunning to infiltrate the very system designed to protect children. He quietly befriended court-appointed counselors, exerted subtle pressure on social workers, and whispered offers of financial security to those who could sway reports in Willow's favor. He even sought out the court's psychological evaluator, feeding them selective information and underhanded incentives, ensuring that the official narrative began to reflect Michael as emotionally unstable and potentially manipulative. Private conversations between Michael and Wiley. Moments filled with tenderness and attempts to help his son make sense of the chaos, were secretly recorded and edited out of context. A quiet reassurance from Michael became a veiled threat in the transcripts Drew delivered to the court. Loving letters Michael wrote to both Amelia and Wiley, filled with encouragement and support, were strategically leaked to tabloids and legal circles, portrayed as tools of coercion rather than expressions of affection. Whispers began to circulate that Michael was emotionally engineering the children, bending their loyalty like a tyrant desperate to win, not a father struggling to hold his family together. Inside this world of manipulation and half-truths, Willow began to unravel in a different way. Though she continued to play her part in public, behind closed doors she felt the rot seeping in. The certainty she once felt, the righteous fury, the unwavering belief that she was doing what was best, began to erode. She noticed how Drew's affection had turned mechanical, how his touch lingered more like possession than comfort. He no longer asked her what she wanted, he told her what they needed to do. His presence in her life, once a scaffold holding her up, now resembled the bars of a cage. What had started as a partnership forged in desperation now felt like an unholy pact with no exit clause. The more she relied on him, the more she realized that Drew wasn't merely helping her. He was orchestrating her. Every decision, every step, every emotionally charged courtroom plea was part of a script Drew had already written. She had become an actor in his drama, her grief packaged and weaponized to tear down Michael. The guilt grew unbearable. Each time she watched Michael walk into the courtroom with quiet resolve, holding Wiley's hand like a fragile treasure, she felt the sharp edge of shame. Each time he looked at her, not with anger, but with wounded confusion. Her heart stuttered. She saw in his eyes a man who had once loved her, who still believed in her somewhere beneath the storm, and she hated herself for the things she was letting happen. But retreat was no longer a luxury she could afford. Drew had seen to that. He held every card now, every document, every manipulated report, every carefully timed leak. He even had access to the private messages she had once shared with Michael in moments of reconciliation, now twisted and archived as evidence of instability. He reminded her, not with overt threats but with gentle, terrifying certainty, that the only way forward was through him. He dangled the children in front of her like a reward she hadn't yet earned, telling her that they were so close to the finish line. Just one more court date, one more performance, and then everything would be hers again. But she began to understand that what he was offering was not motherhood. It was a prison dressed as paradise. The truth of her entrapment settled over her like fog. Drew had not only wrapped his hands around her future, he had gripped her past, her vulnerabilities, and her dreams, shaping them into weapons she could barely recognize. The worst part was how willingly she had handed him the tools to do it. Her longing for her children had made her blind to the cost. But now, as the court prepared for its final ruling and Michael's legal team uncovered cracks in the manufactured evidence, Willow found herself standing on the edge of a terrifying truth. If the house of lies collapsed, it would bury them both. And yet, more than Drew, more than the court or the public, it was her children's eyes she feared facing the most. Because no ruling, no verdict, could absolve the mother who chose silence when the truth cried out for air. Michael, after enduring weeks of emotional torment, nights spent staring at the ceiling, days filled with silent rage and a father's helpless sorrow, finally reached the point of no return. He had once believed in the integrity of the legal system, once trusted that truth would prevail if he simply kept being the steady, loving parent his children needed. But as the lies mounted and the court wavered beneath the weight of Drew's manufactured truths, that faith withered. He realized that the rules had changed, and the only way to protect Wiley and Amelia was to fight fire with fire. With that clarity, Michael assembled a private investigation team made up of cybersecurity experts, legal analysts, and retired law enforcement professionals who owed him favors, or believed in his cause. Their mission was straightforward but dangerous. To uncover what Drew had done and to expose it before it was too late. They combed through hours of surveillance footage, retrieved metadata, decrypted deleted files, and traced electronic trails buried beneath a layer of falsehoods. The breakthrough came when one investigator unearthed a corrupted video cache from the Metro Court's backup system. Embedded in the raw footage were subtle inconsistencies, frames missing, timestamps altered. More damning, however, was the digital signature left behind by the very technician Drew had employed under the table. A further audit revealed a series of financial transactions routed through shell companies, leading to a single, undeniable conclusion: Drew had paid off a security employee to edit the video, framing Michael as negligent in the poolside incident. Michael felt both vindicated and sickened. The betrayal was deeper than he'd feared. Drew hadn't just tried to steal his children. He had assaulted the very foundation of Michael's identity as a father. And worse, Willow had stood beside him the entire time. Whether she was complicit or merely desperate didn't matter now. What mattered was the urgency. If the court didn't know the truth soon, Michael could lose his children permanently. With the evidence compiled, sworn affidavits secured, and witness statements re-examined, Michael ordered his legal team to prepare an emergency motion to reopen the custody hearings and submit the new findings. He didn't just want to win, he wanted the court to see exactly who Drew was and how far he'd go to destroy a man's life for personal gain. But as the evidence made its way through the court system, Michael's thoughts returned repeatedly to Willow. Despite everything, despite her silence, despite her betrayal, a part of him still ached for her, for the woman she used to be before this nightmare consumed her. He hoped she would see reason before it was too late, that she would step away from the abyss Drew had led her to. What he didn't expect was that she might already be too far gone. Michael wasn't sure Willow could even recognize herself anymore. The woman who once cried over bedtime lullabies and whispered prayers over Amelia's crib now stood beside a man who trafficked in lies and manipulation. Did she know the damage she had done? Could she ever face herself, let alone her children? And so came the breaking point. On a blisteringly hot afternoon in early July, during what should have been another mundane swimming lesson for Wiley at the Metro Court. The poolside was unusually tense. Parents whispered among themselves. Reporters lingered beyond the gates, tipped off by someone inside the courthouse. The judge, who had agreed to observe Wiley with both parents present before issuing a final ruling, arrived quietly with 2 court officers in tow. Drew and Willow stood side by side, carefully rehearsed smiles in place. Willow wore a white summer dress that fluttered in the wind like a symbol of innocence she no longer believed she possessed. Michael, on the other side of the pool, knelt beside Wiley, adjusting his water wings, whispering words that only a father could understand. When the judge stepped forward, everything began to unravel. She had reviewed the emergency motion. She had seen the tampered footage and the financial trails. Her voice, though calm, cut through the heat like a blade. She asked Willow if she had known about the payments, if she had ever questioned the footage, if she had suspected that the accident involving Wiley might not have been an accident at all. And in that moment, the world slowed for Willow. Her breath caught. Her eyes darted to Drew, who remained eerily still. His hand reached out to hers, a silent plea, or perhaps a warning, but this time, Willow didn't take it. For the first time since this ordeal began, she stepped back. The court fell into a hush as her fingers curled into fists at her side, not in defiance, but in fear, in shame. Wiley, standing nearby, looked at his mother with a gaze no longer confused, no longer uncertain. In his young, perceptive eyes was the dawning awareness of truth. He stepped instinctively toward Michael, clinging to his father's side, choosing his protector not with words, but with the silent language of children who sense more than they understand. And Willow, watching her son choose the man she had tried to ruin, felt her composure begin to dissolve. She wasn't losing Wiley, she had already lost him the moment she surrendered her soul for a false promise. Drew, sensing control slipping from his fingers, tried to speak, tried to redirect the narrative, to question the validity of the evidence, but it was too late. The judge raised a hand, silencing him, and turned her attention back to Willow, not with judgment, but with piercing expectation. Willow stood in silence, tears forming but not falling, her body rigid with guilt. Every path she had taken since agreeing to marry Drew now stretched before her like a road lined with broken mirrors. She had betrayed Michael, betrayed herself, and worst of all, she had betrayed the children she claimed to fight for. And so, under the scorching sun, as the laughter of other children in the pool echoed like cruel reminders of what might have been, Willow came to understand the true cost of victory built on deception. The judge adjourned the observation session early. Court officers escorted Drew away for further questioning. Michael held Wiley and whispered something into his ear, and for the first time in weeks, the boy smiled. Amelia, too young to understand, giggled in her stroller as the breeze tickled her feet. But Willow stood frozen, watching, grieving, unraveling, no longer the woman fighting for her family, but a ghost at the edge of the battlefield she helped create. And in that unbearable silence, one question haunted her: if redemption were still possible, would anyone ever believe she deserved it?